This is definitely not the lineup I would have imagined having going into 2024, especially because these are all different ecosystems. I have Sony, I have Fuji, I have Red. Mainly, I've been a Sony user, having the FX3, the FX30, and at one point the A7C, but now I have all three, and honestly, it hasn't been too bad. Alright, let's start with my photo camera. I have the FUJIFILM X Pro1, and back in 2022, I picked this camera to be my everyday camera for a few reasons. One, it was small and compact. Two, it was a little bit older. And three, it still took really good images. And also, it was inexpensive, so I didn't really have to worry about it getting damaged, or if I handed it to someone, them accidentally breaking it or anything like that. I could just have fun, take pictures, take this camera everywhere. What I didn't know is that this 14-year-old 16 megapixel camera would end up being so good. I actually use this mainly for social media and personal use, but recently I did start using it for pictures with the Sin City Bartender. I don't think this camera will be my photo camera forever, or really for that much longer, but as of right now, I am using it for some client work and the Sin City Bartender, so it's just nice to know that this camera can do it if I need it to. So I have four lenses for this camera. I have the 7 Artisan 18mm pancake lens, a TT Artisan 27mm autofocus lens, a Brighton Star 60mm macro lens, which has been my go-to ever since I started using it with the Sin City Bartender. I love taking those macro shots with the drinks. And then lastly, I have the TT Artisan 35mm, one of my favorite lenses ever. All of these lenses are super cheap, but they are really good, and they've been producing some really good images for a camera that was supposed to be my everyday camera, but ended up being a work camera. Some of the drawbacks of this camera: it is 14 years old, so it is already really outdated. The screen is not good at all. I got it for like $200, so the screen was already a little beat up, and it's not very bright, so it's hard to work with sometimes. And the autofocus is not very good. All my lenses are manual lenses except for one, I believe, so it's not really an issue. I do like to manually focus most of the time, but it would be nice to have a good autofocus on my photo camera. Overall, if I had to give this camera a rating from 1 to 10, I would give it an 8.9. I've had a lot of fun using this camera, and I always say that I've made some of the best images on this camera. And one of the cons that it's super old is also a pro. Because it is 14 years old and it was super inexpensive, I don't have to worry about this camera getting damaged. I don't want it to get damaged, but I don't have to worry about it. And also, I can try out all these super inexpensive lenses on it. So last year in November, I had the opportunity to get rid of my FX3 and pick up a Red Komodo. So I did. And I'm not gonna lie, right away, it started out kind of rough with the Red, and I started to regret getting rid of my FX3 and picking up this Red Komodo. The Red autofocus is almost unusable, completely different to the FX3, which has one of the best reliable autofocuses. The R3D RAW files were like double the size of the FX3, which is something I wasn't prepared for. And once I got the Red, I had to start buying handles, cards, everything I needed to rig the camera up, lenses, so it quickly started adding up. My editing workflow had to change a lot as well. And worst of all, I wasn't getting the image quality I thought I would get out of the Red Komodo. So after a little bit, I really thought that maybe I should sell the Red Komodo and go back to something more reliable like another FX3 or maybe the FX6. After a few weeks and a few months, I really started to dial in my workflow. I was getting better images out of the Red Komodo, so I was understanding more what I had to do to get a better image, which means there is a lot of room for me to grow and me to improve with this camera, which really got me excited because if I can continue getting better and getting better and better images, then this camera is definitely worth it. So as of right now, I've decided that I'm gonna keep the Red Komodo. I have 3 lenses for the Red Komodo after selling my 24-105 Canon RF. And this is kind of a crazy lens line. I have a Brighton Star 7.5 fisheye lens, a Brighton Star 35mm lens, and a 7 Artisan 60mm macro lens. I have used the 35mm before and I thought it was a really good lens, although it does have some drawbacks. It doesn't have a declicked aperture ring and it only goes up to f/16, but for what I'm doing right now, I thought it was good enough. And I know this is a crazy lineup, And the plan is to get a set of cine zooms, a DZO Pictorial or Laowa Super 35 Ranger lens. I just don't know which lens I want to get at the moment. And since I don't have any big projects coming up, I don't really need to get the lenses right now, and these lenses are good enough. So if you have any experience with these lenses, let me know down below in the comments. I mainly keep this camera on a tripod. It is the A camera for the Sin City Bartender, and I am excited to start putting this in more of a handheld run and gun situation. I am gonna go on a week-long road trip along the coast, so I'm really excited to take this camera and see what images I can get. I really do like this camera. I like the form factor, I like the way it looks, I like rigging it up, and I really do like our 3D files. Although they are super giant files, they're really nice to work with in post. Overall, if I had to give this camera a rating, I would give it a 7.9 out of 10. It was kind of a rough start. It's getting better. I'm sure as I get better with the camera, this rating will go up. But again, I've had fun with the camera. I love learning a new ecosystem. So I just hope that I can get better so my images on this camera can continue to get better as well. The FX30 is my workhorse camera. I occasionally shoot YouTube videos for other clients. I shoot podcasts, I shoot events. And if I need something quick, reliable, this camera is the camera I'm picking up. I think the FX30 has been completely overshadowed by the FX3. Now, don't get me wrong, the FX3 is the GOAT, but for the price, for what it can do, I think this FX30 is the baby GOAT. The image I can get out of this FX30 is very comparable to what I can get out of the FX3. I can still shoot 4K 60. I don't really go up to 120. I think it does start losing quality there, but 4K 60, 30, and 24, it's really, really good images. And the reason that this camera gets so much hate is because it's not as good as the FX3 in low light. But honestly, I don't find myself in too many situations where I need that second base ISO of the FX3. 2500 on this camera is more than enough. It's an APS-C camera, so people hate on it even more, but I don't mind it. APS-C lenses are a lot cheaper, and if I need to, I can still use my full frame lenses on this camera, so not a deal breaker. It's also a 26 megapixel photo camera, so if I really need a little bit more extra resolution than my X Pro1, I'll use this camera. And the lenses I have are the 10 to 20 millimeter APS-C Sony lens, a Zeiss 16 to 35, a Sony 24 to 105, a Sigma 100 to 400, plus a set of 7 Artisan full frame cine lenses, 35, 50, and 85. And I'm using the 35 to record right now. Now, the cine lenses aren't autofocus, they are manual focus, but I think they're pretty good lenses. I mainly stick with the 24 to 105 mainly because of the range I can get. I use this as the B cam when shooting YouTube for the Sin City Bartender. I use this handheld and I like to zoom in and out. And also this is the A camera when we're shooting short form content. I think this camera deserves a lot more respect than it gets. So just depending on what Sony releases this year, I could see myself getting another FX30 body. I could probably get one used for about 14 or 1500 if I get lucky, and then just having the Red Komodo as my big project camera. Overall, not the most inspiring camera to use, especially when taking photos, but it is a workhorse. It gets everything I need done. I've never had any issues with it, and just because of that, I'd give this camera a 9.2 out of 10. I know this is kind of a strange camera lineup, and it could get even wilder if I throw a Leica, a Hasselblad, maybe a GFX camera. I really want a new photo camera. But as you can see, each one of these cameras has its purpose. I've dialed in the workflow to make it work. It's not the most efficient workflow, but it's also not unmanageable. All right, leave me some questions down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.